Welcome everybody to another episode of Campfire Conversations. My name's Daniel Burton and I am joined here with our new Program Development Manager, Jonny, for a conversation about the intersection of playwork and nature connection. Over to you, Jonny.
Okay, so Daniel, as you know, children in Australia have the right to play. Having the right to play and actualising your right to play are two different things. So can you reflect on some of the barriers that children experience to being able to play?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously there you're talking about Article 31.
Yes.
Yeah, the child's right to play, or child and young person's right to play. I think there are so many barriers in our society, and we can go down two routes. We can go down the education system and care, and then the home life. I think one of the biggest barriers, actually, one of them has just started now. Weather. We're sitting out here doing this podcast, and some whitish clouds have come across, but rain has started.
Yes.
I think we live in a country that has incredibly mild weather, but we are raised in such a way in our society not to have a deep connection with, or an affinity with, or a comfortability with the natural world and what nature provides.
Yeah. Right.
So I love that it's raining now and it's a bit windy, and I would have also loved if we were doing this podcast on a day that was 40 degrees and it was hot and we were sweaty and the sun was beating down. I think because weather is a really interesting barrier to play, and so I come deeply from a place of play outdoors. So here at Educator by Nature, we're about deep nature connection and about resilience through connection. And so when we talk about play, a lot of our work is in the outdoors, in nature.
Yeah.
So I think a barrier that comes up for me is that a lot of education department schools here in Western Australia have a policy that states when the temperature gets above 36 degrees, that children can't be outside. Now, there's an element of that of each school has a different interpretation of that, what that looks like, what that means. But just as a general statement, 36, 37, even 38 degrees as a temperature limit to not going outside, we live in Australia. For a lot of our year, that is the temperature of our outdoor spaces.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think one thing that we're really strong about supporting, and so outdoors in rain, glasses don't work, is supporting people to understand that weather needs to be taken into consideration with lots of factors. So yes, the temperature might be 36 degrees, and that is warm, but what's the breeze doing? What's the wind doing? Do we have shady spaces? Are the spaces that we're playing in and providing opportunity to play outdoors, are they bush, natural spaces? Do they have lots of natural air conditioning going on through evaporation and things like that? What time of the day is it? What is the feels like? What's the UV doing? So there's lots of different elements we can bring into play in accepting play outdoors in those temperatures.
Yeah, and I think coming from the UK, I've seen the exact opposite, in that when there is a little bit of rain and, we have a lot of rain, there's a reluctance to take children outdoors because of that as well.
Yeah.
How much of it do you think is a reluctance on the behalf of the educators?
I think it's a big part, and I would say educators and parents too, because at the end of the day, the opportunity to play often in today's society requires adults to be around, and so they have to be out in that space as well.
Yeah.
And if they're uncomfortable, they're less likely to do it.
Yeah.
So if it's raining, for example, here in Perth, and recess time happens, we often see indoor recess and lunchtime.
Yeah.
Because the adults might not be comfortable with being outside in that rain. Whereas if we have space for that to happen, the children are actually capable of playing in those spaces.
Yes.
But the language of awareness to weather massively impacts the way our children are comfortable in weather too, and that becomes a barrier.
Yeah.
So they then say, oh, it's raining, we can't go outside. They say, oh, it's too hot, we can't go outside. But that's the language coming from the adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think weather is a massive barrier, and I think the other thing that I want to talk about here is, and especially in schools, and especially in our high schools, because play is not just for young children, play is for all children and young people, is uniforms. I feel very strongly that our schools are not built in a sense of uniform policy and uniform expectation to enable children to access their right to play. So we've got girls in skirts or dresses, we've got boys in long trousers and formal shoes, we've got ties, we've got blazers, we've got formal shorts. We have clothing that doesn't enable children to play in the ways that their bodies want to play.
Yeah. What about in communities? So outside of educational contexts, what barriers exist in communities?
I love the work of Heather Schumacher and that whole concept of not going up the slide. She advocates very strongly that it's okay to go up the slide and go the wrong way. I think society's interpretation of risk, of risk appetite, of what it's okay to let your children do, and that pressure on parents to be the perfect parent and to raise their children without them getting hurt or injured or have any exposure to discomfort. And if you do let your children have exposure to those things, which I think make for a really great childhood and really great play opportunities, then there's that fear of judgment from other parents. So I think that's a massive barrier, society's expectations of what parents and families should allow.
So where has that come from?
I think social media has a big part to play. I think our whole lives are much more on show now, and our decisions and the way that we're parenting is on display. Even the term parenting, you can be a parent, but now there's the focus on parenting as a verb, as an action. And I guess there's an unspoken, or maybe it's a spoken, expectation of what good parenting looks like. And when we have something like social media where our lives are much more visible to people outside our close-knit community, then that makes it trickier because we're being potentially judged by a wider audience and a wider audience who doesn't know our direct context. I come back to the idea of children being raised by a village, and we also have parents who are parenting in silo now. They don't have the same support from their local network, grandparents, extended family, neighbours. They don't have the same access to be like, this is okay and my children are safe enough and supported in different ways. A lot of the focus comes back to parents themselves.
And so I always think that from our generation to the kids today, there's an expectation on parents as well because of that. That children's play now is more supervised by adults, by parents, in school, out of school, than ever before. I suppose, to frame a question from that, what can parents do to support children to be able to have similar experiences to what previous generations had in terms of being able to be outdoors, take risks, and bearing in mind there's all of these constraints on parents as well, to like the expectations of society being one of them, and social media. So are there things that parents can do?
I think what comes to mind is access to spaces for play. And a couple of things came to mind when you were asking that question so I think we have an understanding or an expectation in our society today that play happens at a particular location, that for my children to play, I need to take them to the playground.
Yeah.
Or in Australia, I think the beach is a place where play happens, but I need to take them to a place.
Yeah.
As opposed to play happening spontaneously everywhere. Play will happen wherever play needs to happen.
Yeah.
So in that essence of needing to go to a destination to play, there's the access to that location. And if that is with parents, that obviously comes into the schedule that parents and children have. Like, is there time to go to the playground, to the beach, to the local park? But then a step back from that, you were saying about that play being supervised. Do children have access to those spaces alone, or with other people, with other children, with their neighbours, with their friends? And then that, for me, comes back to the element of, like, our children are driven to so many places. So they're not on bikes or footpaths. So their comfort level in their own community to access these spaces is limited, is not the same as you and I in our generation and generations past. So yes, we have a society where play tends to be supervised a lot, but we also have a society where children almost require that supervision to get to the places where play happens.
Yeah. And I think it's important to realise that we might not be able to undo that process, so we have to work with the constraints that we're under for children.
Yeah.
You mentioned time there, and I think that there are more pressures on children's time than ever before as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think so. The expectation to be enrolled in after-school classes or music lessons or specific sport engagement, drama classes, like all the different classes you can have. On top of that, tutoring and homework. I'll come back to homework. But there's an expectation, again, comes back to that social awareness of how we're bringing up our children, how we're raising our children, is that to be a good parent, to have a good childhood, you need to be enrolled in all of these things. If I'm not giving my child the access to these extra classes, they're going to be less than, or they're going to be disadvantaged in some way. So there is the propensity to enroll in more and more things.
I'm strongly agreeing, because I'm a parent myself, and I understand all of the things you're saying are pressures that parents face, definitely.
Yeah. So I guess we need to, as a society, go take the pressure off. We don't have to enroll in all of those things. How can we change the need to be doing so many things? Maybe pick one thing. And look, I'm not against, I was a drama fanatic as a child, so being in a drama class was something I was super passionate about. I've got nieces and nephews who are amazing musicians and are passionate about the music lessons that they have out of school, and I think that is going to set them up for great opportunities in future life. But we don't need to do all of the things.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to their control as well over, just from my own experience speaking to kids, they've told me, oh, I love basketball or whatever it is. I love going to it, but sometimes I don't feel like going.
Yeah.
And so then, but my parents have paid for X amount of sessions, so I have to go. So then the voluntary element of doing those things, which could be play opportunities, not in the sense that they're freely chosen, personally directed, intrinsically motivated. They might be, it might not fit the definition of play exactly, but when they become an obligation, that's when they're certainly not play.
Yeah.
They're just an extension of formal, not formal learning, but an extension of structured, organised elements of the day. It's interesting because I think this brings me on to another question. I want to talk a bit about Kim Village, because Kim Village is a program that you've created which affords children the opportunity to play on their own terms.
Uh-huh.
And it's not structured and organised in the sense that when they come to Kin Village, they're told what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're given choices and they're able to make decisions about how they play and what they play with. So the philosophy behind Kin Village is in nature connection, play work, and various other perspectives. Maybe if we just focus on play work and nature connection, because I think that, am I right in thinking they're the predominant
Principles, pillars.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do those two worlds intersect?
I'm just going to, speaking of nature and connection, I'm just going to relocate an ant that just bit me.
Oh no.
But I love it. We're in nature. And actually on that, so this sounds horrible, but there's a part of me that wants every child to be bitten by an ant at some point in their life. I'm not a sadist, but like this hurts right now. This ant bite is painful, and my nociception, my sense of pain, there's lots of senses going off in my body that I am aware of that pain, but I'm not going to die. I don't have anaphylaxis to ant bites, so I'm aware that there are people out there that do, and that is a serious thing, but your average person, the general population, are not going to die from that experience. And it's an experience that shows that I'm resilient and I can get through that, as long as that ant hasn't continued to crawl up my back and continue to bite me. So your question was about nature connection and play work as key principles within our Kin Village program. So absolutely. So when we first started the program, what we were seeing is that children needed the opportunity to just be outside for 7 hours. So the program runs for 7 hours, and have an opportunity to just be. I say the word just, I don't like just because it's a justification, but simply to be. What's interesting is that the gatekeeper to children coming to the program are parents, because it's a fee for service, it's a paid program, and they're the ones who hold the coin purse. They have to pay for this program. So within that process of having a parent book their child into the program, we have this, I guess, the dichotomy of, in the essence, we want to provide an opportunity for children to have actual play opportunities, freely chosen, intrinsically motivated, and self-directed. There is not a product or an outcome that is prescribed of this program. They don't come home with something necessarily. Essentially, it's 7 hours of free time, and I use that term very loosely because it comes with lots of negative connotations. But at the end of the day, parents are paying for the program. So it's that balance of finding a way to show the value and the purpose in that space.
Yeah.
What we know, though, is that actually without doing much at all, children in this space, when given the freedom, the opportunity, the time and the permission to play, to connect, to be themselves and to explore these natural spaces on their own terms, magic happens.
Yeah.
We have feedback from parents that we get to say that their child comes home. What was one of the last comments we got? My child comes home physically exhausted but emotionally buoyant. And as a facilitator, I do too.
Yeah.
I come home and I have to crash on the couch because it's a long day outside and physically my body is tired, but energy-wise and excitement-wise and joy-wise, I am buoyant, and we want this for our children. And this is, I think, the intersection between nature connection and play work. We come with play work principles that children have access to lots of different resources, that at the essence, the focus is on play, that there's lots of critical reflection that goes on between the facilitators on the interactions that we're seeing. We intervene only when necessary, and in different ways based on an understanding of of play theory, of nature connection theory, and the way that they're interacting. But that playwork realm is supported by ways that we can support the deep drop-in or the connection with the natural world, and utilising things like the natural cycle and understanding the way that different energy comes out throughout different times of the day. So at the start of the day, we're excited and we're passionate and we're ready to go, and we see that in the children that arrive at our program. Also, though, there may be some trepidation or some tentativeness about joining in. So how do we support as a community joining together with joy? As the day goes on, we go through, we get to the heat of the day and the hard work, and we come together for rest, and we come together as a community and we share stories. And then in the afternoon, we have to do a bit of reactivation again and that re-inspiration.
Yeah.
So there's a going with the natural flow and finding that natural cycle in an essence of what playwork is.
And there are long periods of the day where I feel like the children are having an opportunity that they wouldn't necessarily have anywhere else, where some of the things we've spoken about to do with the barriers they experience to play, yes, there's adult supervision there, but it's adult supervision in the sense that we're trying to give them as much freedom as we can.
Yeah.
Often adult supervision is trying to remove that freedom. So there's lots of play happening. Children are allowed to make lots of choices and decisions for themselves, and they're outdoors with groups of peers, and so we're creating I suppose what a point I made earlier was that we're not going to be able to reverse the trends that have happened over a series of decades, but we can work within that context, and I think this is a solution. How are we doing for time?
We're doing good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how do we foster a deep connection to nature through play? I know you've spoken about that a little bit.
How do we foster a deep connection to nature through play? I think that comes down to the fact that to build a connection with nature, we need to be in nature. We are ourselves nature, so there's an element of we are always connected with the natural world because we are connected to ourselves. Although in the current state of emotional regulation, of depression, of anxiety, there is a disconnect with our emotional selves. But to connect with this earth, with these trees behind us, we need to spend time with them. Just as we get to know our family because we spend time with them, we get to know trees and plants and animals by being in that space. And then also that comfort level. So I become more connected to the natural space and less fearful of it if I'm sitting down in the earth. This ant that just came along and bit me, I have a relationship with that ant now, whether I like it or not. And it's not one based around fear, because I know that I've got through that ant bite. What we're seeing a lot with children who come to Kin Village, or the children we work with in school programs, is that there's a reluctance and a physical barrier for them wanting to sit on the ground, to literally sit in earth.
Yeah.
And that disconnect is because of a lack of comfort and connection and understanding and knowing. So the more time we spend outside, the more comfort we build.
I suppose as well there's an element of connection to the local environment as well. Because, again, coming from the UK, the landscape and the natural environment is very different here in Australia to what it is in the UK. And lots of the projects I've worked on in the UK are in urban environments.
Yep.
And I think children do connect with peers and places, but do you want to talk a bit about how, the local environment, how children can connect on a more local level with the environment in Australia, in Perth, in Western Australia?
Yep. As in their local community, their local space?
I think more the environment is what I'm talking about. How, it's quite unique in the sense that we have different animals and plants and trees and things like that. Where we're sitting right now, we could be having this conversation in a built environment.
We could.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're really fortunate here in Australia that our local spaces are so rich and diverse. And we have local councils that put effort into maintaining a percentage of green canopy and green spaces. Access to green spaces in local communities, I think, is really important. I guess one fear that I have is our house sizes are getting bigger on smaller properties. So the front and backyard, that used to be a very prevalent thing here in Australia, is disappearing. Hence the generation or the genesis of things like community backyards. I guess the Australian version of an adventure playground is looking at how do we maintain and how do we continue to have access to those natural spaces. But I think there's an element in there. I spoke about riding to school or walking to school and seeing the footpath from home to school. If your family is fortunate enough to go to the local school and not have to drive like half an hour to get to school, is there's nature along that path.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The weeds that grow out of the sidewalk, the pavement, the concrete, the trees that you pass on your way to school, on your way to somewhere. And I think we have, obviously we don't have things like snow here in Perth locally, but our environment and our seasons do change quite dramatically, and we see markers of seasonal change and environmental change that can build our connection as well.
Right.
And then from there I go into a First Nations connection element of looking at the 6 Nyoongar seasons as a way to find deeper connection with our local environment, because those 6 seasons speak more clearly to the changes that we identify in the natural world, more than the 4 European seasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking at this time of year that we're recording this, we've just gone into Jeren, which is the start of April, and it's ironic, well it's not ironic, it's natural that we have more rain. Our mornings are cooler. That heat has dropped off.
The last couple of weeks were a major exception to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've just come out of a heat wave. You just said something there. I've just forgotten what I was going to ask you. Go on, carry on speaking.
So I think finding ways we can connect on a day-to-day basis. And we talk a lot about deep nature connection, but deep nature connection comes from, I don't want to say surface level nature connection, but regular, simple's a better word than surface level, simple elements of nature connection.
Yeah.
Picking up that leaf and
do you find that the kids that attend the program for a longer time, you can see that development in their connection with nature? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
You can see it physically in their body, in the way that they are in a space. As simple as taking their shoes off, that comfort level of children that haven't been to that program regularly, or that you can see don't have a regular connection to the outdoor world, to natural environments, will keep their shoes on for much longer, and their engagement physically in the space will be different. Children that have a very healthy connection with the natural world or come to our program a lot, often will come barefoot, like actually won't bring shoes at all, and they engage differently in that space.
Yeah. And so seasonally the program changes as well.
Yeah, and it has to. So in summer our focus is more around the river and water bodies and engaging in play that happens around keeping cool and managing our temperature.
Essential.
we have to. And in the winter, our program centres around fire.
Yeah.
Because that's a source of heat and warmth, but also a source of fascination. It's also the time of the year where we're allowed to legally use fire, but also from a respect of the natural environment, it's a time where it's okay to use fire. So absolutely, working with what the seasons allow and being responsive to environmental factors is a definite way that we can build nature connection.
And can we promote environmental stewardship through play and nature connection?
I think so. It's a fine balance for me, and our conversations that we've been having over the past couple of months, Jonny, about intervention styles and playwork, and that care.
I've just been bitten by an ant.
See, they're aware of us. They know we're here. Finding ways where it's appropriate to intervene and have an intervention in play that is going on to bring awareness to respect for the other being. So if we've got hammers and nails and we're creating things, not nailing into a tree or asking a child not to nail into a tree is a way that we're intervening in play, and we're stopping that play. Some would say that's some adulteration in that process, but I'm speaking for that tree when I stop that engagement, and that small conversation bringing awareness to the fact that that tree is a living being helps that stewardship. David Sobel says that we need to support children to fall in love with the earth before we ask them to save it. And I think for children to be stewards of the natural environment, they need to have time in it. They need to know it. We can't ask them to save the Amazon rainforests when they haven't spent time in their local parkland or bushland or their backyard or down at their local bush space.
We've spoken a lot about, well, not a lot, but a fair bit about loose parts and the role that loose parts play might have in sustainability, specifically environmental sustainability, because I think it has an obvious role in social sustainability. But we've been reflecting on loose parts play and the idea that you would gather up junk resources that might otherwise go to landfill, or and there's a bit of tension there from my point of view, that I think people assume that that's all very, very positive, but then it's what happens to the stuff after it loses its value for the program, shall we say. So what are your thoughts on that? 'Cause this is something that's bothered me for years, and I'm interested to know what your thoughts are.
I think initially I love the idea of natural loose parts, and how we source those and how we use those brings an awareness of sustainability, or regenerative practice, as opposed to sustainable practice. But then when we're talking about human-made loose parts, recycled materials and things like that, I guess it's really not recycling, it's reusing or upcycling.
Yeah, it's more closely aligned, I think, with upcycling, even though I don't think it's exactly that either. But a lot of people tell me it's recycling, and I'm like, I don't see how it is.
Because so you're giving that object another life, or an extension of life, maybe. But it's not becoming something else permanently, and at the end of the day it is still going to probably end up in landfill.
Although, I mean, to counter that, some of the things that I've collected for my loose parts supply are now in their 4th or 5th year, which so you're right, it's kind of extended their lifeline. I don't know how much longer they're going to keep going. Some of those things might last another 5-10 years. But there's lots of things that I've collected up that haven't been that robust, that have had to be disposed of in general waste.
Which I think in and of itself, maybe not directly that object or the use of that object leads to sustainable practices, but the awareness of that object's existence. So a child playing with some offcuts of industrial waste, plastic material, some things that would normally go in the trash, those items, when they see them, and it might not be a conscious thing, it might be subconscious cognitive exploration happening, they're seeing things that are normally rubbish. So I'm wondering if there's more awareness that is brought to them about rubbish and about objects that are just discarded. So if we give them a toy that is a produced toy with the purpose of playing with that as a toy, then that's a natural process of it's an object that has been purchased for that purpose. But if we give them a bread crate or a milk crate or a spool of something industrial, cardboard tube, those types of loose parts that they may not see that purpose for, I wonder if there's an element of them going, oh, where would this have gone if I wasn't to be playing with it? I don't know about that, but...
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not sure either. I think it raises children's awareness of there's these things that could be potentially used for other purposes than what they were designed for. But then I don't know if that ever leads to anything beyond that. Yeah, it's a complex issue, I think.
I don't know how you would do a longitudinal study on a person's sustainability practices based on their experience with loose parts as a child.
Yeah. I'm sure for some people it might resonate and it might influence them. I don't know that it does for all children. Yeah, and so I think is there types of loose parts that if you were to collect them and use them for play provision, that you're actually doing more harm than good by using them?
Pool noodles comes up a lot for us in conversation because of the microplastics element of it.
Yeah.
And in the use of the loose parts, is it damaging that object to a point where small parts are breaking off and we're leaving that in the environment, as opposed to that particular piece going to landfill and it being in one place. So that's a conversation that comes up semi-regularly for us.
With teachers or
with
other professionals?
Yeah, other professionals and educators.
Yeah.
From a sustainable point of view. And I guess for me that comes back to a risk-benefit assessment of the benefits of interacting with that loose part and the play opportunities, the self-development opportunities, the physical opportunities that come up with playing with that loose part balance out and outweigh the impact that particular loose part is having.
Yeah.
I say that tentatively because I think it's something I'm still grappling with.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's a simple answer or solution. It's, like I say, it's such a complex issue. But it's something I've thought about for years. Have I got any more questions before we wrap up? I think I've covered all of the questions I wanted to ask.
Great.
Is there anything else you want to add to any of the topics we've discussed?
No, I think that's a good wrap-up.
I think you've offered a really great perspective on children's rights, play work and nature connection and what we can do as a society to try to work against some of the hindrances, that some of the things that curtail children's play in this modern world.
Awesome, thanks,
All right,
Jonny.
thank you.
We'll see you on the next episode of Campfire Conversations.